Hey Collective, it's Alan coming to you with a video that will be accompanying a post I'm releasing this afternoon on LinkedIn, which surrounds the topic of triggers and how important they are to the pathway for self-mastery. And essentially what the written form was talking about in a nutshell before getting to the video was specifically talking about how it is in the triggers that most will either define your path and who you become, if you can overcome them, or will be the biggest Achilles heels any of us can have. And essentially with the written form, what I wanted to focus on was helping illustrate to the collective consciousness that it's in the knee-jerk reactions, the involuntary nature that we sometimes have in responding to external stimuli that can be most hurtful or harmful to whatever cause that we are undergoing or in pursuit of. Because what it does is it illustrates an insecurity or something that you have not mastered within yourself, where you are having a anger outlash or outburst, or you're doing something that undermines your capability to handle the stress and strain in the case of the written form of like really important positions and so forth. So I wanted to spend a little time kind of elaborating on the topic with the video and kind of illustrating the overall scope and purpose of why I had even done the post as we head into 2025. And essentially at the root of the matter, what I was trying to point out to everybody is that one of the things about self-mastery is the ability to control or at least adopt an understanding of what your shadow is trying to tell you. And one of the greatest blueprints, almost like the idiot guide for the soul, to sometimes figure out what it is that they're supposed to be working on in this life and what might actually be their soul mission, kind of comes down to what is it that triggers you, right? It's those things that agitate you into having some sort of negative reaction to whatever is happening to you. And in the wrong lens can be used to completely kind of rip you apart. And it's kind of like when the shark smells blood, it then bites onto the prey. And so the piece really was trying to bring focus onto the importance behind grounding your energy in times of conflict or any time that you are being exposed to stimuli that is not of the best service for you, and understanding that in your reaction, someone may be trying to goat you. And especially heading into this next epoch, which, every story has a climax. Why did we think that humanity would lack that same climax? But I'm just saying, there's going to be a lot of us needing to have these type of conversations as we head into it, even though it's the holy holidays, that we are resting before all of this takes place. It's important to remind our collective consciousness and our friends and family that heading into next year, it is going to be that type of environment where people will purposely be trying to piss you off and antagonize you, because the more divided we are, the easier it is to manipulate and control people. So understanding what your triggers are as we head into this more relaxed phase right now, before we head into 2025, is a great resting place from which to really identify what it is that each of us has an Achilles heel with, where we have a knee-jerk reaction to someone else engaging us in a wrong alignment. Because when you begin to identify what those things are, you can work through the smaller aspects of it, which then empowers you to not have the same reactions, which can, in the right alignment, lead you to the ability to handle crisis or criticism in an empowered stance from which they don't take dominance. There's nothing they can take from you. Their intention is to undermine you and to rattle your nerves so that you're not fully present for whatever the conversation is that needs to be had. So understanding what triggers you in the smallest detail is usually the best route to begin the process, as we, especially during this relaxed phase, to kind of look at yourself and go, okay, why does someone moving something in my house bother me so much? And so that's a little smaller detail. And then you can look at it, like I always tell people, like, if that's something that really bothers you, then I would probably assume in a very polite way that you come from a very large family, and in your foundation, you shared a lot of spaces with other people, so you never really had your own space. So now that you have it, you want everything in exactly the right place because you've never had that structure before. But understanding that trigger is really beneficial to someone who is then going into a relationship that's very important to them, where possibly the person is spending more time in their house. They have to learn how to have a little bit of leniency in those triggers in order to allow the other person to be who they truly are in a combined area. And so if they work on it ahead of the relationship, then they understand that inevitably, especially if you plan on having kids or something, they're going to move stuff around in your house. And there's nothing really you can do about it. So why not work the issue before it becomes an actual blast of some sort of energy? So triggers in this particular fashion are incredibly important for you to stand on the mountain. And what I mean is that, have you ever seen someone who is a really perfect candidate for a really prestigious position, and somehow another person triggers them in front of the people that are observing this, triggers them into an involuntary reaction that makes the observer maybe have a bad taste in their mouth about the capability of the person, the ideal candidate, to be able to handle the pressures in a public setting? So you take a perfectly apt person, someone who's completely right for the position, and you send like a troll in there to see how they react. And if they react negatively, then the people who are observing it then take a step back and go, maybe this isn't the right candidate. Meanwhile, it probably was the right candidate, only they screwed you over. They purposely went at you. That was their intention, right? If you show out in front of a very important person, then the person that is observing it can kind of see that they did it intentionally, but it doesn't change the fact that you still reacted to them. And that means that you may not be the leader in the scenario that they need. They may need to fashion another candidate or a different type of personality to then be the face of that particular thing, because they need someone who's solid on the mountain and does not have knee-jerk reactions. That does not mean that a well-adjusted or super spiritually apt individual cannot still have triggers. But the triggers that they have adopted are the ones that they do voluntarily, meaning they are conscious that that is a button of theirs. And most of them will lead with that. There are a couple things that piss me off no matter what. I don't care who I ever become or if I ever become anybody big. There are certain things that I do not allow in my space, and those are called boundaries, right? But you only can really understand what those boundaries are and will stand on the mountain to defend such triggers if you are voluntarily, like you are actively engaged in knowing that you're going to have that response. But most people go about life not really understanding what the more submissive triggers are and what it's kind of indicating to you as far as your own work that you need to do within yourself. So you have to navigate through those particular triggers before you can ever understand where your true boundaries will be, right? There's a big difference between a trigger, which is involuntary, to a trigger that is actually a boundary, right? So something that is an involuntary reaction would be considered a trigger, but something that you know ahead of time would be considered a boundary that you're setting, in the way that I look at it. But there are places where I know for a fact that I do not tolerate certain behavior, and instead of it being a trigger, I'm actively, consciously choosing to respond the way that I am. And that is super important for us heading into 2025 and especially 2026 when all hell breaks loose. It's a rough ride. I'm just going to tell you guys, it kind of reminds me of the Harry Potter line, there are dark times ahead. Ignorance is ignorance, and especially willful ignorance is even harder to deal with, but we're going to have to stand very firmly together and understand who we truly are, because they're going to test us incessantly. Remember, I said 2020 to 2025 was a dry run. 2025 is where all the shit really goes down. It's a wild ride, they say. So you understanding what your triggers are, the involuntary expressions of them, is going to be super important to how well you do in this next phase, right? Because wherever there's a climax in a storyline, you know that there's a rainbow that's on the other side of the storm. And you know that you're trying to get there, but it's going to take stamina, and it's going to take an ability to stand in your power and be unmovable in order to really be a great leader. In fact, it's going to define you in this next phase of our evolution as to whether or not you are indeed a true leader, because it'll be in how you can rally people around you in times of crisis and stand as the beacon that is not responding to them involuntarily. It's like preparing for war, only this time it's psychological and spiritual warfare, right? And so when you have that type of stuff going on, the easiest way to undermine you is to trigger you into looking bad in front of other people. And so though we're not supposed to care about the opinions of others, if you are the face of something, or if you're part of a movement where you are a dignitary or a delegate or whatever your place is, whatever you've been cast in this new stage setting, you're going to have to be able to ground your energy and look at them and go, oh, I know what you're doing, in your head, and not say anything. And instead of reacting to it, just stay exactly on par, finish what you're saying, don't let them fuck with you, and immediately make sure that your mind is in the right place, and make it almost like a game. Like, oh, I get it. Okay. You want me to lash out so that they look bad upon me, but how about I just stay on course and make you then have to do the work of responding to me elegantly and eloquently. And I bet you they can't, right? People like this have this ability to manipulate other people by taking them to the mud. They love to do this thing where they don't even have the right answers. They just know that you're never going to get to finish your sentence because you're going to get all mad and then you blow up and then people look at you like you're like a loose hinge or something. And everybody's now looking down at you. Meanwhile, you are absolutely in right alignment. But what do? They tricked you. And that is the purpose to such manipulation. So the piece really in the written form centered around understanding how important it's going to be for us heading into it to take the time and like use a diary or whatever your form of inner process, meditation, whatever it is, to really think about where it is that we hand our power the most away. Another perfect example. Let's say you're in a bar setting and you're with your friends. I personally used to have this thing like, I don't mind if people fuck with me like I'm cool, but don't fuck with my friends. And so I understood as an adult now that that was a trigger. So instead of me having a knee-jerk reaction to it almost involuntarily, even with alcohol in the system, I now don't do that. But it takes the ability to be present consistently to not engage in that particular manner. So it's the same thing, right? Someone who accidentally bumps into your girlfriend. If you're an anger ball and that's a trigger of yours, you're about to go off and kick this boy's butt or girl's butt for something that they might actually say, I'm sorry for, but your knee-jerk reaction is to be defensive of your family and your friends. And especially with everything going on in the near future, you're going to have to be more grounded in order to understand what is worth the battle and what is not. Because what ends up happening is there's a reverse side of this with people who have too many triggers, which is they just look like anger balls. And when someone is incessantly angry or miserable all the time, it sends out its own energy and it blocks people from coming towards you, and that you prevent the community from being built before it's even started, right? If you destabilize the players on the field as much as you can, then the field becomes weakened and they can't really put the strategy into motion. And so things like that on a personal level is something that we can work on heading into it so that we can then bond together and be the community that we're going to need to be. But we first have to work through our shadow aspect, which is what are those things that undermine us every day? Like, all of us have different triggers. There are some people who really get triggered by politics, or they get triggered by news anchors who are very, very left or very, very right, but you're still investing your time and energy into watching them, so you are paying to be triggered incessantly and you are being goaded on a regular basis. And you claim that you want knowledge, but you understand the topic without having to watch those particular people trigger you. So what is that rush that you are trying to get off of engaging that type of content, if not that it somehow serves your lower egoish nature of being able to yell at the TV and whatever it is? So technically what we're doing in that moment is we're trying to validate our own position by engaging in battle without actually being in battle. So that if we ever actually do have to confront another person, we have no leg to steg on because we've already been yelling at the TV. Some of us get into such righteousness that we believe that we know the answer and that no one else has any possibility to say anything to challenge you. That is a trigger. You cannot be of service as a leader in this new epoch if that's your personality trait. You have to be willing to work with other people. And you have to actually sit down sometimes and engage with people that you don't like. Now, that is for those of you who are very spiritual and are part of the beacons in the leadership council that is on the rise. You are going to have to discern what is, if you're the face of something, what is in that function, and then what is your private life. And you have to set those boundaries very clearly. But if you're not even there yet, you can't really even be called into action because the higher realms or whatever you believe in need to know that you are capable of handling it. So here's a perfect example. There are some things that I do not tolerate. I told you guys earlier. So my guides in the higher realms know exactly what they are. I do not lie about anything to myself because I figure if I'm going to ever make it out of this maze or whatever the situation is, if I'm ever going to be an efficient leader or teacher or friend or whatever it is, I need to be myself. And so I know where my shortcomings are. But what I don't have anymore are knee-jerk reactions. What I do have is I make conscious choices every day. And if I feel like being a petty bitch, I will be a petty bitch in my private life. But it is a conscious choice, taking the power back onto myself. Anything I do in that moment, I'm willing to face the consequences. But I cannot act that way if I'm on behalf of the divine, or if I'm bringing a message to you guys and somebody in the comments goes, I'm just going to ignore the person, it doesn't bother me. But I'm in a function. So if you have a function in which you are public facing, you have to have worked through your lower triggers so as to understand what is your personal space and what is your face for the cause. And so you have to be willing to discern those things and make those boundaries very clear to whomever you work for or whatever community you're working with, so that it doesn't fluctuate and they consistently know where to back you and when to step in and so forth. But if you're loose-goosey and you're just running around yelling at everybody and you can't finish a statement without like calling people idiots or calling them names or going into this huge battleground thing, and it's just like all these words are like daggers. And if you're one of those people, how are you in service of the divine? You're in service of darkness, right? That's what ignorance is. That's the result of ignorance. When you need to have your emotional state be the driving force for your mental place, then you are a little bit off balance. And so finding what those triggers are is super beneficial to our journey and the trajectory for humankind, right? Because no matter whether we like it or not, we cannot keep going the way this is with complete polarization. But this last epoch, this big push that they're about to put in front of us, is going to be to drive us as far apart as they can from each other in order to ensure that we cannot go on. It's going to make it so that it has to fall apart because they believe that it's a lot easier to just start all over again under their rule, whoever it is, because both sides have their own issues, y'all. Like, y'all know how I feel about politics. I'm neither left nor right, but let's face it, each side has fucking problems. But they're going to try to keep us as separated as possible because the only way to actually be the winner in this scenario is to find a way to mend the system instead of destroying it, right? Because the people who want to destroy it want to take ownership over it. Those are those people I was telling you in the last video, those particular energies that they think their shit don't stink and it has to be their way because they're right. They're playing God in that way. They think that they know what's best, and so they're going to take freedoms from other people away so as to empower themselves into being the savior of whatever it is, in which case they're going to fail miserably. But us on the receiving or on the opposing side of it, whatever side you fall on, if you are a conscious being, a spiritualist, a change maker, an earth angel, whatever your vernacular is for your position and what your drive is in life, you're going to be tested and you're going to need to have the wherewithal and the resolve to stand your ground in a way that does not destabilize you. Unless it's something that you absolutely have a boundary on and everyone in creation knows it, because everybody knows what mine are and it does not change. Right? Arrogance and someone being a complete dick to me, I'm never going to be nice to you. I don't owe you shit. But in a position or in like a job function, I have to tolerate a little bit more and I have to be a little bit more reserved. So how do you make that differential for yourself? How do you figure that out, right? Because you never want to sacrifice who you are in order to get somewhere, because then you cannot hold that vision long enough. But if you come into the vision understanding where your shortcomings are, where your strengths are, and where you have grounded your energy most, then other people can't destabilize you, and you become so much more potent as a player on the field as opposed to a pawn, right? If someone, I mean, this is a very savage way to say it, but if someone can engage you in a constant battle of words where you're swearing at each other and all that stuff, then you're not even on the board. The only people watching you are people who want to be engaged in the conflict. They're not part of the resolution. The people who like, oh God, there they go again. Those people are going to find another way to have the same conversations without that belittling nature that humans sometimes have with each other, because they know that they can't win the argument. So what do? They destabilize the opponent in order to make them look weaker so as to not have to answer the question. And we saw this during this last election. They really love to do that. And of course, for whatever fucking reason, they fell for it, but bygones. Neither here nor there. The point is, for where we're going, I cannot stress how important it's going to be for us to have worked through the smaller parts and define what is a unbreakable boundary that you have, that you don't care who you work for. They need to know that if someone spits in my eye, we have a problem. Those little things where you are going to stand on the mountain need to be defined, but the only way to really know what those things are is to work through the smaller ones. So let's say you have a trigger of people popping gum. You can work through that pretty easily. But as you begin to unravel the onion and you start to look at some of the things that are bothering you, it starts to reveal what is underneath it that really helps ground your energy. Meaning, let's say that you had a parent or somebody or a sister or a sibling that could not stop popping gum. As an adult, might have an aversion to hearing that sound because it makes you think of that. And it kind of boxes you back into a smaller place where you were not empowered, where you were on the receiving end of whatever the actions were. And so as an adult, you might develop a trigger to that particular thing because you are trying to compensate for where you didn't have any power. So things like that are small, but when you start to unpack them, what you begin to do is find the diamonds within the rubble. And those diamonds empower you, and each time that you empower yourself, you begin to be able to help other people with their triggers. And you're able to then deal with them a little bit more readily in a way where you don't succumb to whatever their vice or whatever their issue is. Instead, you stand your ground and you're able to then go, yeah, I understand that, but here's what worked for me. But understand in the end, I cannot make you not take the bait. Each of us is going to have to really understand that as we go into this next season, because they're going to go after us hard. They're going to want you to be as enraged and as non-present as possible. They want you so angry and so polarized that the last thing you would want to do is fix the problem. And the truth is, we have to fix it if this goes on. If one side takes complete dominance over it and enslaves the entirety of the race, then we know what happens. The simulation, the storyline, all of this ends because there's no reason to keep it going. If you're going to enslave and take everybody's freedom away, so what the fuck is the point of the school? Basic 101. But these people really think that they have the answer. And so when you get into that type of dogma, you have to be able to stand above it, to float above it, if you will, to rise above the fray and look at it and go, all right, so they're going to come after you and they're going to do everything they can to trigger you. If you're a woman, they're going to not only go after your rights, but they're going to make it so that they bring other women forward to engage you and enrage. Because when you act in rage, certain energies feed off of anger and rage, and they really get high off of it. They're just as addicted to drugs as everyone else, only their drug is the suffrage of other people. And so their whole aim will be to enrage you and engage you in the lowest possible rung, because they know that if they keep everybody on the ground, nobody can ascend and make it to where they need to go. How can you be a leader of the future if you're on the ground just rolling around the mud? What they want is to stop as many of you from getting up and going, I'm not rolling around in the mud. Okay, say what you're going to say. You ain't paying my bills. I don't give a fuck. And then all of a sudden you start to work through your triggers, and then you really start to uncover why you're doing certain things or why you're reacting in certain ways. And suddenly you're a fucking powerhouse. And what are they going to do? Whisper campaigns? They're going to do smear campaigns? Okay. But if you're a divine vessel of light, they better not. You want to see the left hand of God? Fuck with one of these people. I'm telling y'all right now. But as a collective, just because you arrive at a certain destination doesn't mean you don't help the next person turn around and you don't help them up. And what we're going to have to do right now is to really ground our energies and understanding what triggers us so as to stay empowered within ourselves, so as to then be of service to other people, right? Because there's nothing better to destabilize the opponent's side than to have someone very strong as a leader standing in the middle going, I get that everybody's upset, but we need to stay focused. It's that person during an earthquake who has been through earthquakes before and is not afraid of death. They respect it and they love their life every day. That person is not going to scream and run around all chaotic. They're just going to stand in, or they're going to get to where they need to go. They're not going to be reacting to it. They're going to be analytically present and going, what is my course of action here? You want that leader. That's a grounded leader who is not triggered by the motion or the stimuli around them. Same thing with business. You want somebody who can literally stand before whoever the people are that are the investors and so forth, and in a very strong, prominent position, even in times where things are tough, to say, we got to stay the course. I'm telling you right now, it's going to work out, but I need you to stay with me. What are they doing? They're not reacting to people like, I'm going to pull my money, blah, 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 blah. They're literally standing their ground and saying, I get your concern, but look at me. We're going to be fine. You just have to stay on course. The same thing with all of this. The more triggers you have worked through, regardless of whether it's professional, spiritual, psychological, whatever it is, the more triggers you alleviate, the more boundaries you have and what you're willing to deal and not deal with. But it's not a reaction to someone else. It's you being you in front of the world. And that's what we're going to need. So by the time that the written form was done, I was left thinking about, well, did I want to do a video? And the reality was, yeah, I did. Because I've said it before, some of the people who look the weakest are going to be the strongest. There's something called humility and there's something called quietness. A reserved person, I'll put it to you this way. Who are you more afraid of? The silent person who's not saying anything to you and is looking you dead in the eyes as you're going off on them? Or the person who's back? No, you're more afraid of the one who's just staring at you going, keep calm. And they start leaning into you. And you realize who you're fucking with. And then at that point, what fight or flight kicks in. You're going to run. So we need more people like that. I mean, not engaging in battle and all that stuff because that's, superfluous. But you understand my intent, right? We need people who can stand their ground and be present and be able to help other people stay present and grounded when things get rough, because they're going to get rough. So when it was all said and done, like I was saying, for the written part, I just kind of left it in a way that was just kind of, you only have so many characters. So I just left it in a way to kind of empower people to understand that it's important to work through their triggers, because there's something called self-mastery. And self-mastery applies to so many different demographics and so many different people. A mother who is very well grounded, nothing is going to happen to her babies. Nothing is going to happen to her cubs. They could be in a car accident. That's the mother who is so focused, she figures out, I'm going to pick up the car. So what is she not doing? She's not being triggered by it. Instead, she's going into action. She has a clear mind. She understands what she's doing. She knows what she's going to have to do, and she does it. It's called well executed. And so the more grounded you are and the less triggers you have, the more empowered you are to make the other person have to show up at the table at the same vibration. And if they can't do it, the world will see it. They won't come after you. It's one of those weird things about like bullies on the playing field. The last person you want to fuck with if you're a bully is someone like me. I do not put up with bullies for any fucking reason. I have no problem taking them to the mat. But it's like an actual confrontation. I don't pussyfoot around it. You know what I mean? So I have a different warrior mentality. And yes, I choose to rise above it. But at the end of the day, you still want a leader who knows when to go to bat for their crew. You need someone who understands that it's not always bad to have a trigger if it's a boundary, right? The only difference is one is voluntary, one is involuntary. But if you're in the middle of a war, psychological or spiritual, you want the people who are clear-headed and the ones who aren't being triggered into destabilizing the foundation from which everyone is standing on. You want the person who's going to be able to be really grounded, and you want them to look at you and go, we're going to be fine. And we are. Right? Like I said, every story in the history of all evolution, in the history of the world, has always had a climax. And this epoch has to change. So there's going to be a major climax here. And it's going to be very, very rough for a lot of people. But if you're one of those people who takes this opportunity at this rest period to look at yourself really, really intrinsically, you can alleviate the strain of whatever's underneath the trigger and remove the trigger to a point where you're empowered, right? A delegate. What's the difference between a political leader or a businessman and a delegate? Those are individuals who are selected by whatever country they represent, who represent the face of that country. And so they act in accordance, and they're grounded even in times of crisis and war. They stand their ground and they represent an entire group of people. That is a delegate, right? A businessman represents his company. Or a CEO represents his stock and everything that he represents in that company. But he is a physical so the things that he does while in function are not the same things that he does in private life. But when it comes to him, or people with a particular title or prestige or whatnot, they do understand that they can't run around doing certain shit behind the scenes because it's going to come out. So you carry yourself differently, and the only way to really do that is to understand what is your Achilles heel and where do you falter. Because if you're aware of it, you're always conscious, even if it begins to get a little bit tickled, right? You immediately go, oh no, I have not come this far after everything I've been through in my life. I am not about to fuck it all up because this motherfucker over here is coming at me wrong. I'm sorry, guys. I swear. I'm from the South. I'm from New Orleans. We curse. And it's just a great way to kind of add emphasis without being like all weird. But the truth is, I am from the South. And so my point, though, being that you want to be that person. And especially if you're a father or a mother going into this, because there's so much change coming. I mean, now they're talking about possibly even deporting there's a whole thing that's going on right now. And so when the foundation is shaken, you, whoever is watching, are going to be the ones that are standing firm. And you're going to be the ones, like if you're a dad, you can't let other people trigger you. Because what happens if you do the wrong thing and you go to jail or something, or they get you for something that they goaded you into doing or tricked you into doing, and then they remove you from being able to protect your family? Did you ever think about that? I mean, that's what triggers are. It's a way to destabilize you in order to make such a tragic mistake that you are taken out of the equation. But what we need is more people who stand in their power and are literally the equation. They are the solution. And one of the things that I was trying to get at is that when you have opponents who like to undermine you, the biggest nightmare they can have is have someone who is not undermined. I don't care what smear campaign they try to do on people. Another person can look at you, whoever I'm talking to, and can tell that you're the real deal, that you are a being of light, and you are here to do whatever you can to be of service to humanity as opposed to be a destructor of it, right? Because we're fighting for the human soul. This is about human spirituality. It's about the human's evolution. It's about freedom and all of the rights that we have as human beings, whether you're male, female, gay, whatever the hell the synopsis of your storyline is. You understand that there's something greater going on here, and a lot of it has to do with the enslavement of the human spirit. They're trying to break us. But you cannot break someone who has fixed themselves, has healed themselves. And the message that I'm trying to give to you guys is that this is part of the greatest healing you can give. Because when you are fully healing yourself, you are going to attract other healed people. And then you have fucking power. When you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in a community who are pillars of the community to stand together come hell or high water, then that community is going to make it. And we all know it. It's what separates a loser from a winner. Someone who's willing to win at all costs is automatically defined as the loser. Because the person who didn't cheat and didn't fuck everybody over, who gets to the same destination, already won. They chose right relations. But what they didn't do is they didn't let, like the hare and the turtle. The hare was talking smack the entire time with the turtle, and the turtle's way behind. But the turtle was slow and steady, won the race, kept going. He didn't let him goad him. He didn't, all the teasing in the world. Oh, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it. And guess who made it? He did. Because the other one got cocky. Man, ego is one of the greatest enemies to all humans. You know what I mean? It's kind of the thing, like freedom is one of the most incredible gifts that we've ever had in the universe. But when the ego gets involved, it will sacrifice you in order to be right. And that's what we're up against, is that type of mentality. So because the light's kind of fading right now, I'm going to close here and just say, guys, when it comes to triggers, you have all the power in the world. This is your coursework. This is your mission in life. If you can get rid of those, or at least alleviate them to the point where you are consciously interacting with other people as opposed to involuntarily reacting, you are now standing as a beacon, and you are the player, not the pawn. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.